Ladies and gents, welcome back to another Engineers podcast. Today I'm joined by one of the co founders and CEO at Traversal. Very likely a name that you've heard of if you're playing in the AI space at the moment. Anish has come to join us. They're in the space of building out an AI-SRE, and Traversal's operating at that frontier, building systems that will shape how engineers interact with production environments for years to come. Anish, thanks for coming to join us.
Elliot, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We always start with backgrounds. So take us through for a few minutes Anish's background.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm originally from Singapore, hence the strange accent. My parents are from India. I moved to the US, so kind of been a, a citizen of the world. Been in the US the last 15 years. Most of my time in technical institutions. So I came to the US for college at Caltech, and then spent a couple of years as a management consultant at Boston Consulting Group, which I also loved. But I this was about 10 years ago. I felt that AI and ML was going to get really important. And I also just loved it. Like I just, at an intellectual level, an aesthetic level, I felt it's something I could just spend time on and it would not feel like work. And so I went back to get my PhD in it and went to MIT in the computer science department. And yeah, broadly researched AI and ML, and fell in love with it at an even deeper level. And I focused on a sub area, well, two sub areas, one called causal machine learning. So the idea being that, as everyone knows, correlation isn't causation. So how do you get AI systems to pick up cause and effect relationships from data? That's what I spent a lot of my time thinking about. And also reinforcement learning, which is how do you search large spaces effectively. Yeah, it was some of the most like pleasurable time of my life was like in my mid to late 20s in Boston, just hanging out, thinking about fun problems. It was a privilege, and I felt like I wanted to keep doing that, keep the party going for essentially forever, and felt the best version of that is to be a professor. And I was lucky enough to get a faculty position at Columbia, which is what brought me to New York. And and yeah, I mean, in some ways, I felt like that I'd achieved the pinnacle of what I was hoping to achieve from my life. Let's get to be faculty, get to do research, advise students, teach, and live in New York City. So I felt I was kind of good with things. And then obviously, ChatGPT happened, OpenAI with large language models and everything, and it felt like the world had changed under my feet in about a week of when I first played around with ChatGPT. And so it felt, it's time to kind of change things up and rethink where all the innovation is going to be over the coming years, which is what led me to start Traversal. But anyways, that was a long-winded background about how I came to be.
No, it's great. It's super informative. And even that bet a decade ago does bring you to here today. Even during your studies, did you see something like what is emerging now with OpenAI, language models, etc.? Is that what you were studying, researching towards, or something different?
Yeah, so I always studied the foundations of machine learning. And so I was less on the engineering side, more about like the underpinnings that make these different algorithms work. And so a lot of the architectures that people have been thinking about have been around for a long time, whether it's in deep learning or even, I mean, you're regressing data. You're trying to find a relationship between some variables and some other variables. And so that general, and I think the difference between machine learning and statistics is in machine learning, you think a lot about how do you really leverage computation and computers to help in the study of learning relationships from data. And so that in some ways, like the foundational underpinnings have been the same, and that always felt very attractive to me as something worth studying. And even 10 years ago, I'd say machine learning was a big deal. Maybe not it is now where it's in the zeitgeist and but it was a big deal even back then. I think no one could have predicted just this kind of transition that we've seen with large language models and their capabilities. I don't think anyone could have predicted that. So that's been a massive blessing, and I feel privileged to like live in this time where that's possible. But in some ways, the foundational underpinnings have been the same 10 years ago, but even before that, I'd say.
Amazing. Introduce Traversal and the inception.
Yeah. So first, I'll introduce Traverse and then how it came to be as well. So At Traversal, we're building an AI site reliability engineer. And at least that's what the category is being called. What that really means at the end of the day is when you have incidents and you have alerts, basically something about your system that is going wrong, how do you troubleshoot how it went wrong, why it went wrong? That process right now is extremely laborious. We spend thousands of engineering hours per organization trying to figure out what went wrong, and it's because the amount of telemetry we're collecting from a system is so large that finding that needle in a haystack is really painful. Which that's what it is, because everything seems to be going wrong at the same time. So they're trying to find that one specific change is really, really painful and difficult. That's just why we have so many people doing it. And that laborious process is what we're trying to automate with Traversal. It seems like just the right time, both based on our research and also all the developments we just talked about with LLMs and forth.
You were in stealth for a while, and I still remember this almost mini explosion coming to the market. We're Traversal. I do want to talk about that stealth moment because you're obviously spending a lot of time doing research, testing your hypothesis, proving your concept. Talk to us about what Traversal looked like inside of stealth, how you're doing your research and how you're actually testing some of these theories and ensuring we can build something with great research, great engineering that we can bring to the market.
Yeah, maybe I'll tie that back in with the history of Traversal and how we got to the point where we decided to come out of stealth and bring ourselves to the market. So we started the company in January of 2024, actually without really an idea, but a clear sense of the type of problem we wanted to take on. So something at the intersection of our research, which was in causal machine learning and reinforcement learning, and how it fit with agentic systems and LLMs. And we're seeing where did that intersection make the most sense, and went through a few different pretty interesting ideas. But of fourth co-founder, the four of us who co-founded the company, three of us come from MIT, are researchers through and through, and one of us came from Citadel Securities, and he had just dealt with this problem a ton at Citadel. As you can imagine, being up is something that's crucial for them, right? As with any high frequency firm, and when we looked into the problem, it felt kind of like a perfect problem for us, at least conceptually, as we talked about, because it's some spike happens, you're trying to figure out why, and there's 1,000 other spikes, and is a given spike a symptom of the issue, a spurious correlation, or truly the root cause? It's hard to say. And so finding this proverbial needle in a haystack is exactly the type of things our research fit in with, and it's exactly the types of things LLMs are good with, because the haystack is logs and metrics and traces and code and so on and so forth, and it's petabytes of data. So you need an agentic system to search through it. So everything kind of made sense in terms of the type of problem we were looking for. And obviously, observability is a huge market. It's only growing. It's one of the largest spends in software. And I think with everything happening in the world of AI generated code, it's only getting bigger, right? Because we're logging more. The surface area of code is a lot bigger. And so the problem's only getting harder and harder. So that's why we decided to take on this problem. And we came to the problem around March of last year and said, okay, this is the problem we want to take on. And we were lucky we were able to raise a seed round pretty much immediately. And the reason we were able to raise it is that this was a problem where our first backer, Sequoia, had felt that they bought into the problem, but they felt this is the problem, but the technical risk is really high. The market risk is low. If you can solve it, there's a lot of financial upside. It's just about, can you solve it? And so, and that turned to be true. I'd say all of last year, from March to Jan of this year, 2025, we were just trying different things. We're just trying to see, is it even possible to solve this problem with the current set of tools and technology that we have, or is it not? And there's like a ton of innovation that happened at the agentic layer, the infrastructure layer, the data layer, everywhere. And we were able to get some good data points from the market where people were actually using it in enterprises, people are paying us good money. And so I felt, okay, like this is no longer like a science experiment, it's actually possible. And that's when we went to go raise our A, but we still decided not to come out of stealth, and we waited another 6 months. And we waited the 6 months because we wanted to see not just that you can make it work with one customer, two customers, but it actually repeats and it looks the same. So you're not just a glorified services company, you're an actual like technology and product company where the same thing is working across many, many companies. And I think so that's when we decided to come out of stealth. Also, I think this is one of the markets where everyone gets the problem. Everyone's bought in that this is a problem that one should take on with LLMs. And so it's not hard to convince people. My fear is that if you try to make too much noise too early, people will get very excited by the prospect. They'll try a product, it won't work, and then collectively the market will go into the trough of disillusionment, as we say, where they're like, okay, it's probably not time, it's not baked yet, we have to wait 2 years. And so I think that's something I'm very sensitive to. And so when we came out of stealth, I wanted to feel that this is the time when we can now start going to the market reasonably aggressively and make sure that we actually delight our customers versus disappoint them.
100%. You hit the nail on the head at that last point. I think it is all about customer retention. And this is something that is product-led growth, and people will talk about what a fantastic experience with Traversal. That's critical to keep growing your business. So love it. They are great insights. I want to touch on assembling the right team, combining research and engineering, and truly what assembling the right team means for Traversal, and then almost break down some of those engineering challenges between the research and the engineering part. That if I was to walk into Traversal, what would I see? What would I experience?
Absolutely. I think it's I'll begin by saying that I think this is generally might be one of the hardest problems in all of software, or AI meets infrastructure at the very least. And the reason it's so hard is that if you think about what agentic systems are doing, they are essentially automating workflows that people did. And I think this particular workflow of troubleshooting is one of the hardest that we do collectively. And that's why both in terms of the time pressure, where every minute of downtime can have massive financial ramifications for a company. Second, the fact that we as people are just bad at troubleshooting, right? We're very bad at staring at dashboards, at time series data, at like millions of logs and trying to figure out what happened, because we just cannot keep that level of context in our heads. And that's why you suddenly have 50, 100 people in a instant war room trying to figure out what happened, right? And in some ways, they're trying to create that shared context of what went wrong as quickly as they can. And we throw people at it, we throw bodies at it. But there's a natural breaking point to this, where you just, as the systems get bigger and bigger, you just cannot keep throwing more and more people at it. And the downtime that we will experience collectively will be high and high. And we're kind of seeing that in the last few weeks with some of the outages that have happened quite globally and publicly. So I think this is going to become more and more of a thing unless we solve it. And so, anyways, I think it's one of the hardest problems that agents have to solve, because we're not very good at solving it as a workflow. It's not a repeatable workflow where each time you're doing the same thing. Each incident is a snowflake, and it looks very different from the previous one. And so that's one reason. And then the second is, you typically telemetry data or observability data is petabytes of data, especially like the Fortune 100s. And being able to have a system that is able to search through petabytes of data in 2 minutes, which is how long people are willing to wait when they want an answer from an AI-SRE system, is just a massively challenging infrastructure and data problem as well, right? So it requires, and then fourth is that it's the observability systems, the way the UI UX looks is very noisy. And there's a reinvention that needs to, and not by anyone's fault, is because you're trying to give people as many cuts of the data as possible. But in this new generation of AI and agents, the way people interact with telemetry data needs to look very different. So there's challenges across the stack, right? There's from the agentic layer itself, like how do you actually create a new workflow that humans are bad at? How do you actually get back an answer in 2 minutes, which is the complex infrastructure and data problem? And what is the product experience that they don't feel like being given yet another dashboard? And so there's just problems across the stack that you have to deal with. And towards solving it, you have to bring kind of the right set of folks together. And in some ways, bring the right set of folks together that would otherwise not have an incentive to be together. So we have some world-class, obviously AI talent, because they're attracted to building these novel agentic architectures. You have some of the best data engineers who are thinking about how do you rethink observability data when it is meant to be queried by an agentic system versus meant to be grokked by an engineer looking at a dashboard. And then some really strong dev tool product thinkers who can rethink both, can fluidly think through both the way observability data looks like right now and the history of it, but also how it needs to get reinvented. And so there's just like a whole, and then obviously SREs. There's, we have, I would call the world's first SRE researcher in the company who spent many years at high frequency hedge funds and financial services troubleshooting. And now he troubleshoots for us almost from first principles so that we can kind of teach an AI system to think in that way. And so you have these interesting people where you have an SRE who's been in the world for like 20, 25 years in industry, talking to like fresh PhDs, and they now have a really compelling reason to be together, which would otherwise not exist even a year ago. So I think those kinds of interesting interminglings of people is kind of crucial to solve a problem that requires a multi-faced approach, a multifaceted approach to tackle.
But I really value that you broke down the different layers as well. I hadn't thought about the complexity of humans interacting at the layer of observability data and the patience that it probably requires, and do they want to interact with this workflow all the way through to the infrastructure layer. So it's really interesting thinking. So I appreciate the share. And that is quite interesting that you have someone who spent 25 years in high frequency trading environments, now spending time with PhD researchers and actually applying this problem to help you. And it very much feels like the companies that are able to acquire the best people could potentially really increase their odds of solving this problem faster, maybe better than their competition. Do you think this will be an AI wide problem that we're going to see?
Of the problem being acquiring the best talent, you mean?
Acquiring the best talent.
Yeah, I think I do think this is a time where everything is being reimagined and reinvented, and so people who can. It's interesting. I found that the talent is how I define talent. I guess has changed. So you can have people who have, let's say they've been a world class product manager for the last 20 years. It's unclear that they might thrive in this new environment because you have to both think through customer needs, but you also have to have a very fluent understanding of what is possible with AI today and 6 months from now, and to be able to make those bets, right? And so you're gonna both have to make bets, like these research bets of where the fundamental infrastructure, which is the AI frontier models, are going, and also tie that with customer needs. And so I think being able to straddle and having an open mind is a different kind of talent that you need than what you would otherwise think. And so, yes, I mean, I 100% agree that the talent is I think, going to be the most scarce resource in this entire field. But the type of talent, I think, is requires a bit of original thinking as to the right kind of person to solve something, especially when the world is getting reimagined.
Interesting point. And if you are placing bets with Traversal for what you can share for the next 6 months with model changes, infrastructure changes, customer need changes and demands, where are Traversal betting? What could we see from Traversal in this next 6 months?
I think we're making massive bets. I said over the last year, at least this year, we've been as much of a data and an infrastructure company as an AI company. And I think only when you very carefully do a co-design between the AI frontier models, the data layer and the infrastructure layer, in a way that you're thinking about all of them in harmony, can you make some step shift changes. And so I think a lot of those changes will now be reflected in some of the products we're going to be introducing over the next 6 months that we believe will make our system almost daily use. So I think we want any given company, their entire operations, to run through Traversal, and so not just when an incident happens, but also just when they're trying to get a sense of how the system health looks, or if they're getting thousands of alerts. All of that should be happening through Traversal, and even the fundamental data layer, right, where there's a lot of redundancy in the way people store and collect observability data and overspend on it. Can we rethink that part of it too? And so that's a lot of the work that we've been thinking about, and I think will come to market in a steady way over the next 6 months. Yeah.
Interesting. Where would you say some of your really key engineering technical challenges are for people listening, for people that could be and should be very interested in Traversal? What are the problems of today and even tomorrow that you need to solve?
Yeah, there's many. So the first one I think that I find really interesting is how do you rethink what telemetry data, how do you think what a log or a metric or a trace should look like when it is not meant to be grokked by an on-call engineer, but is meant to be queried by an agentic system. I think there's a total reimagining of telemetry data that needs to happen, and in a way that is it's designed to be by an agentic system that is also being invented. And so both of those things are getting invented at the same time. And I think being someone who can think carefully about both AI and data is, I think, really, really interesting. And those are the two key challenges we're facing. The third one being, I'd say, evaluation. So how do you actually evaluate how your system is doing? So I say it's akin to like a board game, right? When you think about reinforcement learning, a lot of times the first few wins came in board games like chess or Go or whatever it might be. And those are very interesting, right? Because you're playing the game, but you only get the reward at the end. And the reward at the end is whether, did black win or did white win, right? But there was all sorts of actions that were being taken along the way that influenced the end answer, but you only get to see the end answer. Similarly, in our world, you are searching through this massive haystack for the needle. Now, you might have missed the needle, but it's unclear where in this journey as you were traversing through this haystack did you miss it. And so you get this really sparse reward at the end, but the mistake might have been made, the sin might have been occurred way back in the journey, right, of the agent. And so trying to figure out how do you do good evaluation when you have this kind of very late feedback in the system is a really interesting technical problem that we think about a lot and have spent a lot of time building systems for.
Amazing. And I've just actually reflected while you've been speaking. What's it been like being a first time founder in this AI age and building a company at 100 miles an hour with competition as well, which I'll come on to in the next couple of moments? What's that experience been like?
Yeah, I've absolutely loved it. I think though it's been kind of a days where I don't really know where the weeks go. I'd say for the most part, I pinch myself and feel just deeply privileged and lucky to be building this company. I think the thing that probably gets me going the most is we're all in person in New York City. I see everyone on the team every day, at least Monday to Friday, and it makes me. That's what really gives me a lot of energy. So I think it's that feeling of privilege of having such smart people at the company who are also just good people and feeling responsible for making sure we all succeed gives me a lot of joy. And I'd say, interestingly enough, I think it's not been that different from being a professor and being an academic in some very specific ways. I think being an academic, you have to deal with large amounts of uncertainty and very delayed gratification. You can go 4 or 5 years with basically seeing no reward and not even knowing where you are, where you're going, and kind of working through the dark, right? You don't know where point A is, you don't know where point B is, you don't know how to get from point A to point B. And so I think that level of uncertainty and being comfortable within it and thriving in it is something I feel quite trained for. And I think that translates quite well to creating a company, especially like a very technical company with research as being a big part of it. You just have to be comfortable with uncertainty, and I quite thrive in it now, as do a lot of people here. And I also think that being a good researcher, a lot of it comes down to good storytelling. You have to be able to take a very complicated concept that is quite new and figure out how to explain it to different people, package it in a way that different people can resonate with the messaging. And I think that's like a puzzle that's probably the thing that I was best at as an academic, was how do you package the storytelling. And I think it's the same thing here, because there you are, you're giving research talks to your colleagues, you are writing grants to get funding, you're recruiting PhD students who have offers at the very best other institutions. And I think that same thing translates here, whether you are fundraising, whether you're giving a pitch to a customer, whether you're recruiting someone. A lot of it is storytelling and needs to come from an authentic place and explaining complicated things in a very simple way. So that's actually felt oddly very familiar. Obviously, the pace at which you move things here is very different, and you have to constantly make bets that you have to experiment with constantly. Versus there in research, you can make a bet for a year and kind of stick with it. Here, every you might make a bet for a year, but you have to reevaluate every 2 weeks, And so I think that change has taken some time, but I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that storytelling trait. Actually, offline, I was going to say that to you. I think you're fantastic at that, but I'll say that here online. I think you've done a really good job throughout this process of outlining how Traversal came to be and the problems that you're solving. Where did that self reflection come from, by the way, in terms of how you could draw the correlations between being a professor and being a founder? Because the delayed verification of 4 or 5 years, that was quite an interesting point. Where did that come from?
I think funnily enough, despite being a professional statistician in some ways, I mostly make the most important decisions in my life through pure gut instinct. I think it typically doesn't take me the wrong way, and if I overthink it and try to overanalyze it, I get pulled in the wrong direction. And my board member from Sequoia Bogomol has always said the same thing, and that's, I think, has reinforced that point in my head. And so in some ways, a lot of these reflections have been things that have come to me up, post doing it versus a priori, right? And so I think, in my opinion, you just kind of follow your gut. You'll feel it, and afterwards, you can always rationalize how they were connected. But it would be incorrect of me to say that, I knew that this skill set would translate so well, or something like that. You're just going by gut, I think, for the most part.
Love it. Love it. We have touched on competition externally coming into this conversation, and it's interesting. You're in stealth for a period of time. It makes sense. You want to validate what you've built and researched so far. But the AI-SRE space is quite vast and people are solving problems in a different way. How do you see the landscape with competitors and how other people are solving different problems to you from your own lens and from what you know?
Yeah, it's a good question. And how do you position yourself, and how you? It's been interesting. Without Fundamentally, I think the question comes down to: is this an AI problem, or is this an observability problem? And I think I'm biased, but I genuinely believe this is an AI problem more than anything else. And I think that has translated in very specific ways compared to our competition, which there's the startup world, there's the incumbents, there's the frontier labs. Everyone has a different angle. So at least I'll start with other startups in the space, then we can talk about competition from some of the bigger players as well. And so I think one interesting thing has been, if you consider this an observability problem, then typically what you do is you would produce more telemetry data in a way that you think is best suited for an AI system. You produce that data, and then you have an AI system. You slap an AI system on top of it to do something, and that shows up by installing a sidecar on people's Kubernetes pods or in their infrastructure, which is the traditional observability way, where the way to solve the problem is to produce more data, your proprietary data. Versus we have kind of taken a different approach, almost out of ignorance, where we said, okay, we're not observability people, we're like the system of intelligence on top of it. So we're simply going to sit on top of all the data that you're already collecting, that you're already paying millions of dollars for, and actually help you gain insight from that. So we require, for example, only read-only access to your systems. And because we don't get to control the data that is being produced, the burden on the AI side gets a lot higher, because you have to make your AI systems work without actually having any proprietary data that is being created, right? So I think those are some of the very tactical things that have shown up from this meta point of: do you think it's an AI problem, or do you think it's an observability problem? And then within the SRE space as well, I think SREs do many different workflows. I think the most complex one, the one that executives really care about at the end of the day, is incidents. That's the thing that gets bubbled up to a VP of engineering, a CIO, a CTO. Is like when you have those sev ones where the company is down in some ways and you're churning customers. That's really what matters. Those are also the most complex ones to solve, and that's where you have 50, 60 people trying to troubleshoot this for a few hours, if not a few days. And so I think that's where we feel like is our technical edge, is solving those in a best in class, world class way, and but also obviously solving the other use cases like alerts and so on and so forth that we also do. But I think incidents is where the real technical mode is, and we're focused on that in a big way. Yeah.
Spot on. I think, like you said, with what we've seen over the last few weeks in particular, publicly, there's been a number of incidents that
Yeah,
have caused challenges for a lot of companies and will cause pain. And it's even more signal that actually we need more data. We need more AI understanding of how do we solve this problem? How do we not get to this problem?
that's right. And so I think there will be new players in the space. I think the problem with observability in some ways is that it's incredibly fragmented. And so if you look at any a real sizable company, they're using 5 or 6 different solutions, like observability vendors. And the problem is none of them are willing to give you insight on data stored in someone else. So you might have observability company A for your applications, observability company B for your infrastructure, another one for networking, whatever. But to actually solve the issue, you have to traverse through all of them. And that's really what I think it gives a new player the right to win in this space. And I do think that another interesting angle is that the frontier model companies will also obviously try. I think building out a AI solution for the entire software development lifecycle is something that everyone knows is such an important problem. So I'm sure that the frontier models are also in some ways thinking about this. And people already are using things like Claude to debug, at least very simple things. So that's another interesting angle of players in the space as well. But I think the space is so big that, a rising tide, what's it called? Rising tide raises all boats, that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of there's a whole generation of multi-billion-dollar companies that will get built, I think.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. We've spoken about assembling the right team as one of the most key things for you as CEO. This is almost like a open invite to the right people. Tell the podcast a little bit about who you're hiring, locations in which you're hiring, and the velocity before we.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as a team, have grown quite rapidly. So we were probably around 6 or 7 people at the start of the year. We're now closer to 50 people. Most of the hiring has been on the engineering side, and we've tried to keep the standard very high. We're all in New York City. And it's a mix of researchers who have come from some of the best PhD programs and labs. We have a lot of high frequency people from some of the best high frequency trading companies, a lot of people from infrastructure and dev tool places like Datadog, and also people coming from some of the best in class AI companies, whether that's like a Glean or Perplexity or Hebbia or whatever it might be. And so I think it's an interesting group of AI product thinkers or product engineers, AI researchers, high frequency traders, and dev tool and infrastructure people. And I think it's this interesting group of people that are making this a reality. And we're hiring on all fronts, whether it's in the data processing layer, the infrastructure layer, the agentic layer, the forward deployed part of it, product. We're hiring kind of across all parts of the company. And anyone who applies, I think we've found that they have a really enjoyable time interviewing. We make the interviews super practical and something that everyone who's come through the doors feels like they've learned something. And that's something that's really important to me, is that if you spend time with us, you're putting a big time investment into us, you should come out of it feeling like you learned something as well, versus just getting interrogated on some lead code kind of thing, which we don't do at all. So hopefully this is an open invitation to come spend time with us, and you won't regret
It
it.
is indeed. Well, that was really good context. PhDs, labs, high frequency trading environments, AI companies, dev tooling. If you're listening across engineering, product, sales, even if you listen to
Yes, absolutely.
you should go and talk to the man himself, Anish, or talent teams, which all the links are in below. I want to say a massive thanks for coming to join us. Some fantastic storytelling capabilities, as I've already said. But you've been awesome telling us a little bit about the Traversal journey and where you guys and girls are going and the problems that you're solving for this space. So again, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, Elliot. You're a fantastic interviewer, and excited to be hopefully working together in the coming months.
Thanks a lot. And for people listening, likes, shares, subscribership, all that good stuff keeps this little ecosystem buzzing around. Go and check out Traversal and their careers site. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us, and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Enginears is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Enginears.io. It's no_. We've also got a website which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.